What else? What else do we know about JT?
Married at 15.
She got married at 15. Good for you. You are not a commitment foe. We appreciate that. Yeah, and so with that amazing introduction, ladies and gentlemen, this is JT.
Actually, I was 31. So I feel like I should start out, well, actually, I kind of feel like I should start out like a 12-step meeting. Hi, my name is Jane, and I'm a Civil War reenactor. And also, I'm a librarian, which can be a pretty deadly combination when you're starting to do research for trying to present accurately the past. When you're a librarian and trying to research all this stuff. And one of the reasons I got really interested in the type of information I'm going to give you tonight is because I was with a reenactors group that was presenting to a gifted class at a school. And we got all done and asked for questions, and this one young man in this gifted class, very smart, I'm sure, he was African American, and the question he asked us made our jaws drop. He said, "Who won?" In all seriousness, who won? So I became a collector of all kinds of Civil War information that kind of humanizes the war. It was a very, very confusing time. And I hope I'll give you some information. Some of it you may already know, some of it you may not. But it was a very, very confusing time. I mean, just to give an example, the town of Winchester, Virginia, traded hands 77 times during the war. It was kind of like, honey, it's May. Are we Union or Confederate this month? So they couldn't even agree on the name. One of the very common examples, if you were in high society, you called it the current unpleasantness, especially if you were a lady at a luncheon or something. The Southerns called it the War Against Northern Aggression, among some other titles that weren't quite so nice. And the Union called it the War of the Rebellion, similar titles that weren't quite so nice. Only history has really come up with the name, the Civil War. It was not really called that at the time, but after it became a historical fact. So even the battles could be named two different things. The Union had grown up in all of these cities and towns, and so when they got to the South, they were awed by all this open nature space out there. And the Confederates, who were used to all of this open space, were more impressed by a town or a building. So the Battle of Bull Run, well, the northern side called it that because there was a stream called Bull Run that ran through it. The Confederates called it the Battle of Manassas, after the town that was close by. So those weren't two different battles, they were the same battle. I'm happy to look at my notes here too. Another one was the Battle of Pittsburgh Landing. That's what General Grant called the Battle of Shiloh, which is what the Southerners named after the church that stood in the field. And the Battle of Sharpsburg was also the Battle of Antietam. So there were many, many battles that had two different names. But it's not working. She said, press the down button. It worked earlier.
It doesn't like your topic.
He's having a conflict.
Definitely. Okay.
It was the first modern war. And it was a big mixture of both technology, as they knew it at the time, and the old style of doing war. Like, one of the first things was the balloons. It was the war where they used aerial reconnaissance to good effect for the very first time. Balloons had been around since the 1700s, but they actually, the North would send up balloons and get reconnaissance on the troops. They also would use the balloons to fly over the Confederate troops and drop propaganda flyers. So it was the first real aerial propaganda war. And this is just going to be a whirlwind of facts, nothing really deep here. The first successful submarine. You've all heard about the bringing up of the Hunley. It was, submarines have been around since the 1600s, or maybe even earlier, but this was the first time they successfully used it. Unfortunately, its success was also its demise, because when they hit the ship with the shell, the backwash of the water went through the ballast holes in the submarine and sank it. Plus and minus, yes. Successful? Sort of. The first iron ship navy. This is the Merrimack, and that is the Monitor. The Merrimack was actually built by the Southerns on a scuttled ship called the Merrimack. When it was actually in the famous battle between the two ships, it was the CSS Virginia. And you think, well, okay, they had these two ships. For a long time, I thought there was only these two ships. No, there was a huge ironclad navy. The North had the two different classes of ironclad ships. They had the City, which went into the rivers, and they had the Monitors. They had 50 Monitors, Monitor-class ships. The South had a hard time getting ships. They tried to buy them from Europe and bring them over, but they were usually discovered and captured or sunk before they got there. But they did manage to build a fleet of 33 of the Virginia-class ships. And by the way, that battle was a tie. The railroad. First time the railroad was used to good effect for transportation of troops and artillery and supplies. The first time it was really important in a war. That's why when Sherman marched to the sea to Richmond, he tore up all of the railroad tracks and left just a twisted mass behind. The first repeating rifle. That happens to be a Spencer, the Sharps, and there were several other rifle manufacturers that made repeating rifles. Now, these were not the rifles of the infantrymen. We'll talk about that later. These were the rifles of the sharpshooters and the cavalry. Machine Gun Kelly wouldn't have gotten very far without that thing. That is a Gatling gun, also known as a coffee mill gun, because you can't really see it here, but it rotated, and the way you shot it was you turned the crank at the back. So they called it a coffee mill gun. But that was the very first machine gun. A lot of music that we know of nowadays came from the Civil War. Orally, good old Elvis Presley. That was a Civil War song. Eating Goober Peas. Many people think that's a World War I song. It's a Civil War song. And Taps was written by a general who was trying to replace the French bugle call that was normally played. So he wrote Taps. It was played, and then within 3 or 4 months, both sides, North and South, had adopted it for their go-to-bed, lights-out call. And something we love to hate. Because the North needed to finance their war, Lincoln has to build to institute the first income tax in the United States. Yeah. That is from the New York Times talking about the bill and how it was going to affect everybody. They were very, very young, those soldiers. This is most believed to be, that they're not sure, but most believe that this is the youngest soldier that enlisted. This is Johnny Clem. He enlisted at the age of 10. He lied about his age. He was a drummer boy. In fact, drummer boys did not stand out. Their drum calls were what moved everybody, all the troops around. His drum was actually exploded by a piece of shrapnel. Here he's 12. He ran from a colonel, a Confederate colonel that was trying to capture him, turned around and shot him dead. For that, they made him a corporal at the age of 12. And this is shortly before he passed away in 1937 as a brevet general. But I'm going to read you some other things here too. Now this is I have to tell you, when I give you facts from the South, because so many of their records were destroyed, it's sometimes hard to get information on that. So a lot of this comes from the Union side. They figure there were 2,700,000 Union soldiers. Of that, 1 million were 18 or under. 800,000 were 17 or under. 200,000 were 16 or under. 100,000 were 15 or under, and 300 were 13 or under. Confederates, like I said, were harder to track, but a sample of 11,000 men, 8,000 were between ages of 18 and 29. So they were very young. When you see these reenactors out there all grizzled and old on the field, not very representative. Here's what they wore. Now, we're all used to the movies version with the blue and the gray. The Union, yeah, they wore blue because they had federally issued uniforms. It was a little bit easier for them when the supplies came through. In fact, they wore their blue uniforms at the First Battle of Bull Run. They wore the blue uniforms, and so did the Confederates because it's what they had, which was a bit tragic because nobody knew who they were shooting at. The good guys or the bad guys, nobody knew. They did, so all the women in the South made the uniforms, and pretty soon they weren't able to afford the gray so much anymore. That was more of an officer's uniform later on. So they made butternut out of this. It's a rougher cloth, it's called butternut. The pants and the shirt were both made out of it. And so really, at the end, towards the last few years of the war, it wasn't the blue and the gray, it was the blue and the butternut. Zouave uniforms! Yes, they existed! Several troops of them, in fact, on both sides. These were modeled after the French. Trust the French to have uniforms with flair. They only lasted the first couple of years because those pants made a darn good target. This is a Springfield. This is your infantryman's rifle. It is a musket in that you have to load a single-shot musket. It is rifled, though. Not terribly accurate. Only about 1 in every 5 bullets hit. But believe me, when they hit, they made damage. This weighed 9 pounds, and you had to carry it with your knapsack, your haversack, your bedroll, and whatever else you happen to be carrying along. A lot of the haversacks were discarded when they went into battle. That's where we find a lot of our artifacts when they're going out to the battlefields. And this thing stands about this tall on me. I know because I have one at home. And by the way, my husband said that they kick like a mule when you shoot them. And some of them were women. Now, there were many ways women could participate in the war. They could be a spy. There were several women spies. I mean, hey, you got a hoops going on, you can hide a whole lot underneath that. Some of them were nurses. Some of them were laundresses, legitimate laundresses. We'll talk more about that later. And some of them were in the Ladies' Aid Society. They would, with a man, of course, being the head of it, they would go out into the union camps and they would inspect to make sure that everything was okay and that the men would be well fed and everything for whatever good that did. But some of them actually fought. This is Frances Clayton. This is Frances Callan. And she fought with the Mississippi. That is Sarah Edmonds, who also went under the name of Franklin Thompson. Now, she wasn't even an American, she was Canadian. But jobs were so hard to get at that time for women that she went, she dressed as a man and started selling Bibles. And when she came down to the United States, she got caught in the conflict and she decided she wasn't going to stand around and do nothing. So she enlisted as a male nurse. And she got typhoid, and when she got typhoid, she was discovered. And if you were discovered and you were a woman, you were discharged for sexual incompatibility. It was actually illegal for you to be there. And then this, and I'm sorry, I forget the last, her last name, but her first name was Jenny. But she fought as Albert Cashier, and she was not discovered until after the war was over. And even when she was discovered, she still dressed as a man, and she actually got a soldier's pension. It took her a while to get it, but she actually did get it. They say that they think there might have been about 300 women that actually fought as soldiers. So many of them died. 650,000 died. That would be like the whole state of Alaska going toes up. It was a lot of men. In fact, I don't know how it stands now with the wars in Iraq, but including the Korean conflict, more men died in that war than in all of the other wars the United States is participating in together. More men died in captivity during the Civil War than died in Vietnam. I don't know about you, but look at those troops. When I watched the movie Gettysburg, which, by the way, some parts of that are a little bit laughable, but when I watched Pickett's charge in that movie, tears come to my eyes when I watch those men cross the field and know that so many of them would have actually died. In fact, I was at the 135th Gettysburg, and at that Gettysburg they had a 2/3 size Pickett's charge. I was amazed at the people. This is the humanity crossing. And I seen the field where Pickett's charge crossed, and all I could say, I literally just dropped to my knees and said, what was Robert E. Lee thinking? I mean, ask me sometime about the Battle of Gettysburg. It's pretty amazing. And yes, they died because they were shot. That's a mini ball. That's what comes out of a Springfield. Do you see the size that is? It's not named because it's small. It's named after Minnie, the Frenchman who co-developed the ball. And when that goes through, believe me, it does damage. Even if it only hits 1 in 5 times, it does damage. That's why there were so many amputations. I mean, they literally had arms and legs piled in mountains. There's actually pictures of it. But for every 3 men that died on the battlefield, 5 died from disease. Typhoid, cholera. But I don't want to leave you with that really dark and sad thing. So, we're going to talk a little bit about entertainment. Wait for it. Okay, one of my favorites. When the Ladies' Aid Society would come through on their inspections, they would bring traveling libraries with them. And these these soldiers could rent a book for a penny a day. And they could learn, brush up. You know, books were considered great entertainment at the time. We had cards. Anybody here play cribbage?
Yeah.
Oh, hey, we gotta get together. But yeah, cribbage was I mean, we had poker too, but cribbage was a very popular game at the time, except for women. Women did not touch cards. If you touched cards, you were definitely a fallen woman. Hey, there's your beer. Now, if you read at the time the things that were written after the Civil War, you would think that Ulysses S. Grant was responsible for drinking the entire alcoholic content of the United States. It was not true. He did not drink on campaign, only when he was in private life and as a president. So, but yes, beer all the time. The settlers, which were actually that time's form of the PX, except they were private, many settlers, against what was supposed to be the law, sold beer. You would have people that were sympathetic to whichever side was asking for it sell beer. They were either sympathetic or they were greedy, who knows. And they would raid for beer. There's one story about these guys that these soldiers on the north side that they raided and got a great big huge barrel of beer, and keg of beer, and they were driving it in the wagon, and the wagon tipped and barrel broke open.
Oh no!
Yeah. They said that their unit mourned for days. Baseball. Now, baseball had been known since the 1700s, but each village had its own set of rules and how you played it. And Doubleday, yes, the same Doubleday, who's with the publishing company, decided that they needed a good, wholesome form of entertainment. So he unified the rules of baseball and had the soldiers play it. Not so much in the South, but in the North, baseball was very popular during the warm season. They played it quite a bit. The balls were very small and very hard, and the bats were sticks with just a little bit of lining on the end. They didn't look at all like what we have now. And you're caught with your bare hands, not with any kind of gloves or anything. And then we have this gentleman. Anybody know who this is?
No. General Hooker.
Yes, he was in charge of Washington. And he liked the ladies so much that he gave his name to them.
Hookers.
The hookers, the prostitutes. In fact, the soldiers would tell their wives and their girlfriends and their sisters not to come to the camps because of the huge camps of prostitutes that went along with it. Like I said, I was talking about the legitimate laundresses and the non-legitimate laundresses. And this is a pinup of the time. I mean, look at those legs. This is a time period when you didn't see ankles. When women in the South wore veils, believe it or not. They would wear veils over their face, especially the younger women. And one of the biographers I read, the young lady lifted her veil. She was very bold and lifted her veil to look at the soldiers that were on the train. So this was the Victorian times. Legs, definitely legs. And more legs. But you notice they're covered. They have their boots on, and they have some kind of legging or stocking or something on. So you can't show your legs, but you can show your boobs. I mean, my goodness, talk about the Victorian times. Talk about a confusing time.
Trying to get beat.
So, anyway, well, I'm just trying to make sure I didn't forget anything. Yeah, that's sorry, I don't have any more pictures of boobs. That was
zoom in on that one?
So this is the end of my whirlwind tours, and I hope that I have enlightened you as to some things you may not know about. And I also hope, as a librarian, that it has encouraged you to go learn more about the Civil War online or read a book, some such thing like that. So, anyway. Oh, question, sorry.
How many years was it from the beginning to the end of that war?
It started in 60 and ended in 65. The easy way to remember it is a children's book, Across 5 Aprils, because it started in, about April and then it ended in April. And it's what, okay, one interesting fact. I can't remember the name of the person. I apologize. I don't have it off the top of my head. But the war started, and there was a farmer that had his house in the area, and there were all kinds of bullets and shots and stuff going through his house. So he decided to move his house to someplace safe. And that happens to be the house where they signed the peace treaty. So, yeah. So he got the beginning and the end of the war. Anybody else?
At what point does an event become history?
I think, well, history happens as soon as it passes. So a battle is history even though the war is still going on. Now, it may not be history in the minds of the people. Like, to me, when my nephew came up to me and said, what did it feel like to live during the Vietnam War? To me, it's not history. To him, it was. So I think maybe history is in the eye of the beholder and the perceptions of the people that are looking at it. That's my best answer. I don't really have a real.
Do you think the Civil War was the worst war that we've been in?
Oh, for people-wise? Oh.
No, not just people-wise, but recovering from it.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I mean, it took the South so many years to recover. So long. Just to give you a quick thing, even with all the people that were killed in the North, they had 2,700,000. They figured there was another 2 million men left that didn't go to war. In the South, they had 1,700 that went to war. They only had 8,000 that didn't go to war. So yes, it affected the North in the fact that you didn't have men to work the crops and to run the businesses and stuff like that, but not as seriously as it affected the South. I mean, they had no food. They were literally picking grain out of the bottom of horses' troughs to get enough to eat. One lady who had been very high society, had been in the government with her husband, Mary Chestnut. She ended up raising chickens for eggs so that she could sell them to get enough money to feed herself. So it devastated the South. Absolutely. I mean, this is the, since the American Revolution, this is the only war that has been fought on our own soil. And it really devastated. It didn't really touch the North because, except for Gettysburg, all of the battles were in the South.
So I remember reading somewhere about one of the last, if not the last, naval conflict of the Civil War actually happened up here. That it was to do with the whaling fleets.
That one I would have to check on.
Okay.
I know that there were civil conflicts that happened right after they signed.
Right.